My in-laws and parents cut me off when my husband cheated on me with my younger sister, but now they're calling me to get back with my ex because my sister left him for another man. I never thought I would share this story, but recent events have pushed me to my limit, and I need some perspective from this community. My ex-husband, who I'll call Jack 34, and I were married for 8 years before everything fell apart. We met in college, dated for 3 years, and had what I thought was a solid and happy marriage. Jack was charming, reliable, and attractive, the kind of man people looked at and thought, wow, she's so lucky. We shared common goals, he always supported my career, and everything seemed fine. From a young age, I was always the responsible one in the family. My parents praised me for being the mature, dependable daughter who would make a good wife someday. My younger sister Lucy, on the other hand, was the golden child. She was beautiful, cheerful, and the life of the party. My parents adored her, and it seemed like everyone who met her was charmed by her. I never thought much of it because she was my sister, and I loved her. Sure, my parents always seemed to focus on her, but I chalked it up to typical family dynamics. I thought being the perfect daughter was just how they saw her. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the red flags. Lucy was often at our house because our families were close, and she and Jack got along well. Too well, as it turned out. One day, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. The house was quiet, and I noticed one of Lucy's bags in the living room. At first, I thought she had just come over for a visit, but as I walked down the hall, I heard their voices in our bedroom. I feared the worst but told myself to calm down and not jump to conclusions. When I opened the door and saw them, I knew my fears had been justified. I'll never forget the shock on their faces when they saw me standing there. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I can barely remember the confrontation. I think I was too stunned to process it in real time. I left the house that day with whatever I could grab and didn't look back. That should have been the worst of it, but somehow, what came next hurt even more. When I turned to my parents, hoping they would support me during the worst moment of my life, I was met with indifference. Instead of comfort, they gave me a condescending lecture about how marriages are complicated and how I might have been at fault for pushing Jack away. They even suggested Lucy was doing me a favor by showing him true love. My own family acted as though I was the one who had failed, as if I had somehow driven Jack into my sister's arms. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Jack's parents, who I had grown close to over the years, took his side without question. They were completely smitten with Lucy, treating her as the perfect addition to the family. I tried reaching out a few more times, but eventually got the message loud and clear. I was completely alone. Both families sided firmly with Jack and Lucy. The divorce process was quick and brutally cold. I couldn't bear to keep anything that reminded me of Jack or the life we shared, so I left almost everything behind. I moved into a small apartment, trying to figure out how to rebuild my life without support. I lost almost everyone in my social circle because, thanks to my family's influence and connections, Jack and Lucy managed to paint me as the bitter and unstable one, while Lucy was portrayed as saving Jack from me. Somehow, I made it through. I buried myself in work and slowly started meeting new people, friends who didn't know about the disaster my life had become. Over time, I began to build a new life. I always thought I needed my family to feel whole, but I learned the hard way that I could be okay on my own. Just as I was starting to find peace, everything took an unexpected turn. Out of nowhere, my phone began blowing up with calls and messages from my parents and Jack's family. At first, I ignored them, thinking it was some cruel joke or maybe someone feeling guilty and wanting to check in on me. But the calls kept coming, so I finally listened to one of the voicemails. What I heard was something I never expected. Lucy had left Jack. Apparently, she had met another man who caught her attention and walked out without even saying goodbye to Jack. Now, with Jack heartbroken, both families were desperate to fix things. And who did they think should take Lucy's place? Me, of course. They genuinely believed I should get back together with Jack and reclaim my rightful place as his wife. The messages were full of emotional manipulation disguised as concern. At first, they begged me to come back and forgive everyone. But then the messages became outright delusional, saying it was my duty as a woman to give Jack a second chance. Forgiving him would prove how strong I was, they said. My mother even claimed this was my chance to prove my worth as a daughter, as if I hadn't spent years bending over backward for the family that threw me away. Jack's family also chimed in, saying he was lost without me and that I had to come back to keep the family together. I lost everything because of their betrayal, and now they expected me to walk back into the same hell, pretending nothing had happened. To them, I wasn't a person with feelings or a life of my own. I was just a backup plan, a maid, a slave, or a robot. They don't deserve my forgiveness, my time, or my life. All they care about is poor Jack's feelings and fixing the mess Lucy caused. And the worst part? They acted as though I should be grateful for the opportunity to come back. For a while I debated confronting them. I wanted to scream the truth in their faces, to humiliate them as they had humiliated me. But another part of me knew it wouldn't change much. They never saw me as a person, just someone who could fill whatever role they needed. Confronting them wouldn't change that. They would twist it, somehow make it about them, or tell me I was being dramatic. So, I've been ignoring the calls, trying to find some peace in the life I've built for myself. But they keep pestering me. Every few days, I get another voicemail or text. I've blocked numbers, but they still find ways to contact me. I've thought about changing my phone number, but my life is tied to it. Work, friends, bank accounts. Changing it would take a lot of time and effort. Confronting them won't make them stop. They only care about themselves and their family. So I'd like to know what others in my position have done. Update 1. I wanted to give an update saying that things have improved, but unfortunately, this isn't that kind of update. Since sharing my story, my inbox has been flooded with more messages and calls from my family and Jack's family, and it's been a nightmare to deal with all of this. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing with notifications all day long, to the point where I'm starting to dread even looking at it. I've tried blocking numbers, but somehow they always find new ways to contact me, whether it's through new phone numbers or emails. What really caught me off guard was a call from Jack himself. It wasn't from his usual number, so I didn't realize it was him at first. But the moment I heard his voice, my stomach sank. It was Jack, and he immediately launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech, as if he were reading from a script. He started by saying how deeply sorry he was and how he realized he had made terrible mistakes. He spoke as if he had forgotten to pick up milk on his way home, not as if he had destroyed our marriage by sleeping with my sister. He continued, saying we owed it to each other to work things out and that we had years of history that shouldn't be thrown away. He said we both deserved the opportunity to reconcile, to pick up the pieces and see if we could find our way back to each other. I almost burst out laughing at how ridiculous it was. It was as if he thought a few apologies could erase everything. It felt like he wanted me to be my sister's substitute now that she had left him. He kept talking about the stability we had and how now that Lucy was gone, he realized he had always truly loved me. The whole time he used words like us, our life, and our history, as if he had any right to talk about us anymore. When I finally interrupted him and asked, "Why now? Why do you care now that she's gone?" He gave me some pathetic excuse about realizing what he'd lost and how he thought I'd be strong enough to move past it and take him back. Strong enough, as if strength had anything to do with enduring his betrayal. After hanging up on him, the messages from my parents became even more insistent. They actually had the audacity to say that now that Jack was begging for forgiveness, it proved he was remorseful and that I should see it as some kind of victory because he had lowered himself by exposing his vulnerability. To me, my mom even said, "Isn't it enough that he's asking for a second chance?" They spoke as if Jack's pathetic attempt at reconciliation was something I should feel grateful for, as if it should make me feel validated or worthy. Out of pure frustration, I ended up calling Lucy. I had no idea what I was going to say to her. I just needed to vent. She didn't answer, so I left her a voicemail, telling her that this entire mess was her fault and that she should be the one facing it. I reminded her that she had destroyed my marriage and my life, and that it was her responsibility to explain things to our parents and deal with the consequences. I was so furious that I also sent her an email to make sure she couldn't ignore me. I laid everything out point by point. I was so angry and hurt that I didn't hold back. Of course, Lucy never responded, typical. She caused this chaos, tore apart two families, and walked away without looking back. And now, she's off with some new man, probably not even thinking about the destruction she left behind. One particularly horrible call came from my aunt, who had always been one of the few people in my family I trusted. She was practically begging me to see reason and told me that people make mistakes and that true forgiveness means giving them another chance. Right now, I'm exhausted, mentally and emotionally. I feel like they're trying to erase everything I've achieved, every bit of peace I've fought to find. I know I shouldn't let it get to me, but it's hard. My next step is meeting with a lawyer to see what options I have. But with so many people sending messages and making calls, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do anything about all of them. Maybe I'm not thinking clearly right now, being in the middle of this mess, but it's all I can focus on at the moment. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since the last time I tried to process all this, and honestly, nothing has calmed down. If anything, it feels like someone stepped on the gas pedal of drama, and I'm just trying to hang on. The calls, texts, and emails from my family and Jack's family became so unbearable that I got tired of blocking accounts and numbers. At least something productive came out of speaking with a lawyer who told me we could start with a cease and desist order against the main culprits. Maybe the rest of the family would get the message and stop as well. We might even just target Jack and my parents to send a strong signal. At least talking to the lawyer gave me a little peace of mind. The constant stress and anxiety had been messing with my sleep, which only made things worse. But according to my lawyer, that could actually help our case, showing how their harassment has impacted my mental health could support filing for damages. For a few days, I felt like I'd won a small battle after blocking the latest wave of numbers and emails. But of course, that peace didn't last long. Nothing in this situation seems to let me breathe for very long. A few days after blocking them, I came home from work, tired and just wanting to rest, and there she was, my mother. I never told her where I moved after the divorce. For a moment, I thought about pretending I hadn't seen her and walking away, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. If I didn't face her now, she'd keep coming back until I did. The whole encounter was so typical of my mother, like a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She started talking about how the family was falling apart, how everyone was miserable, and how Lucy's absence was a wound no one knew how to handle. She kept saying things like, "Family is everything," as if that meant I had some obligation to fix everything just because we were related. She went on about how it was my duty to leave the past behind because that's what families do. She even mentioned that Christmas was coming up and said it would be the perfect opportunity for us to come together and make things right. Let's be clear, this is the same woman who stood by while my husband and my sister destroyed my life, and now she was asking me to be the one to fix everything. I felt like my head was going to explode. It was so frustrating but also exhausting. I stood there, trying to keep my composure while she droned on and on about forgiveness and moving forward. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Shortly after that ambush, I received an email from Jack. His message was short but calculated. He said he understood why I was upset and hoped we could have a conversation to clear the air. Oh, and to make it worse, he attached a picture of us on our wedding day. That photo used to make me smile, but now it turns my stomach. I blocked the email without a second thought. But there's more. Just when I thought I'd seen it all, Lucy reached out. Her email came out of nowhere with the subject line, "I'm sorry." For a moment, I thought maybe she was finally going to take responsibility for what she did. But no, her so-called apology was nothing but a bunch of excuses. She wrote about how she never intended to hurt me, how her relationship with Jack just happened because they were in love, as if that somehow made it acceptable. And if that wasn't enough, she had the audacity to say she hoped Jack and I could get back together. She said she was rooting for us to find happiness again, as if her blessing meant anything to me now. How do you even respond to something like that? Spoiler alert, you don't. I blocked her email, just like I did with Jack's. There was no point in engaging with someone so completely oblivious to the damage she caused. These last few weeks have been some of the hardest of my life. Therapy has helped, but sometimes progress feels painfully slow. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when everything around you seems to be pulling you backward, but I'm trying. With the holidays approaching, I know things are going to be complicated. At least the emails add to the harassment evidence. And my mom's visit, which was witnessed by someone else, adds more proof. So while they've disrupted my peace, I'm going to use it all against them. Update 3. I want to take a moment to thank everyone for their kind words, advice, and support. Reading stories from people who have gone through similar situations makes me feel less alone. I didn't think things could get worse, but I've learned that life is pretty good at surprising you, and not always in a positive way. The first major red flag was a letter I received by mail from Jack's parents about a week ago. The letter was nothing but accusations. They spent the entire time talking about how selfish and immature I was for not forgiving Jack and not reuniting the family. I guess they still haven't gotten the hint that I don't care about that family anymore. But the worst part was at the end of the letter when they threatened to expose me to our mutual friends. They said if I didn't do the right thing and talk to Jack, they would ruin my reputation and paint me as the villain. Seriously? What exactly were they going to expose? That I set boundaries? That I refused to forgive a man who cheated on me with my sister? Then Jack decided to take things to the next level. One day at work, while I was minding my own business, one of my coworkers told me someone was waiting for me in the lobby. At first I thought it was a delivery or maybe a friend who had stopped by unexpectedly, but no. When I went out, there he was, Jack, standing there like he was the protagonist in some rom-com, holding a bouquet of flowers. It was the last thing I needed. And it wasn't just uncomfortable for me, it was embarrassing. My coworkers were watching, and I could feel their eyes on me, making the ridiculous scene even worse. Of course, Jack didn't seem to care. He went on and on about how sorry he was and how much he missed me, as if the only thing that mattered were his feelings. He said we were meant to be together. It was as if he was rewriting history in his favor, playing the role of the heartbroken hero when, in reality, he was the one who caused all of this. I was so angry, but I had to stay calm. I told him he needed to leave immediately, that this wasn't the place for his apology. He ignored me. So I went back to my office, shaking with frustration. I locked the door, trying to collect myself. I called security to have him removed. I didn't want to escalate the situation, but at that point, it was clear I had no other choice. I had to protect myself again. That same night, I spoke to my lawyer about filing for a restraining order against Jack. I couldn't just sit around and let him keep showing up. And my family? They haven't stopped either. Even though I've cut contact with them, they've found new ways to try and reach me. One of my cousins, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a long message about forgiveness and how everyone misses me. Maybe she can forgive her cheating husband, but I can't. It seems to be a pattern in my family where men's infidelities are no big deal, and that's why they're upset that I'm not bending to their will. But then there was my mom. A few days ago, she left me a voicemail saying I was tearing the family apart by refusing to forgive Jack and Lucy. That in this family, we don't behave like this. The only good thing about all this is that the cease and desist order against my parents and Jack has gone into effect. So hopefully that will calm things down for a while. I'm also waiting on the restraining order against Jack, though I wouldn't hesitate to file for one against others if this doesn't make them stop and finally leave me alone. I could file restraining orders against all of them, but lawyers charge by the hour, and it's not like I have endless money to keep filing them. For those who don't know, unless I'm in immediate danger, I need a lawyer to file the case. Unlike emergency situations where I can go and file one myself. But my lawyer is optimistic, saying this should deter everyone from continuing the harassment. I choose to believe him for my peace of mind since I certainly need them to stop sending messages, making calls, or showing up uninvited. He's also reassured me that if things escalate further, there are still other options we can pursue. But I hope it doesn't come to that because if we can use those options, it's because things have gotten worse. Update 4. After so many updates where things kept escalating, things have quieted down a bit for me. Now, the reason everything has calmed down might be because of my legal actions, including the restraining order against my ex-husband, which has been granted. Or maybe it's because Lucy has gotten back together with Jack. I'm leaning more toward the second option. I don't think a simple court order could stop the narcissists in my family. But here's the interesting part. There's a long history of women in our family forgiving their partner's infidelities, but as far as I know, the reverse has never happened. It's also true that Jack isn't family, though his family is or was friends with mine. Still, this wasn't free of drama, though I wasn't involved in it. I only received an email from Jack saying that his parents, like mine, are forcing him to get back together with Lucy. According to him, he only wants me and doesn't want to go back to a cheater. The irony must have left the building for Jack because he doesn't realize that's exactly what I thought of him. I was too tempted to reply, but I didn't want him to use it as an excuse to say I wanted to communicate with him, which could lead a judge to lift the restraining order. I simply blocked him again and sent everything to my lawyer. I don't expect much from this since it's not like he's shown up at my workplace again, but my lawyer will handle it. I also received a message from my mother saying that I'd lost my chance to be with a good man and that I'd now be miserable because my sister has taken him back. I don't even know where to start with that. For one, I don't understand how Jack has gotten back together with Lucy if he didn't want to be with her. Maybe he truly didn't want to be with me either, or he's just caved to family pressure. And secondly, I don't think Jack is a good man, as my mother claims, so her attempt to rub it in my face hasn't worked. Either way, I forwarded everything to my lawyer and blocked that new email as well. I was tempted to respond, but I didn't want to bring the drama back to me. If I had responded, I would have told her she could have kept him and handed him over to Dad. Update 5. I thought my story was over, as it had been a long time since I updated everyone about Lucy and Jack getting back together. They even got married during this time, which I hadn't mentioned because I thought it wasn't important. Everyone moved on with their lives, and that was that. Before I forget, I want to clarify something. Jack and my mom's contacts ended up paying and, respectively, in fines. I'm mentioning this because I know many people had asked about it. I saw the notifications when I reopened my account after a long time. This isn't my main account, as I've always wanted to stay anonymous, so I hadn't read anything in all this time. Apologies for not replying earlier. I closed this account a few weeks after my last update and hadn't checked it since. Now that you know Lucy and Jack are married, I can move on to the main point of this update. They are getting divorced. They were married for maybe 5 months. I don't know the exact date of their wedding since I found out about it later, but I estimate they were married for that long. I also don't know exactly when they started the divorce, but that's not the relevant part. The important thing is that now both families are fighting. My parents are on Lucy's side, along with the rest of what used to be my family, while on the other side are Jack and his family. The true reasons for the divorce are unknown to me, though I'm sure there's no shortage of reasons for them to split up. The only thing I can say is that both families have been pushing hard for them not to divorce. And when that didn't work, they started fighting to see who could claim the biggest victory in the divorce. The friendship between the families is over, and they've been saying all kinds of things, accusing each other. It's a situation similar to what I had to endure. But unlike me, at least they have each other. So that's it. If people want to know what happens after the divorce, I might make a new update. Edit. Even though not too many people have asked, I'll share one more thing here. Lucy and Jack have finalized their divorce, and although I don't know what happened with the division of assets, the one thing I know is that neither family speaks to each other anymore. That's what should have happened with my divorce, but every day it's clearer to me that I was never truly part of that family, not in any way.